Hey, what's up, obscure mic people? It is Bark yet again. Why does this seem like I just can't get that where I want it? Anyways, today's video is going to be about podcasting. It's going to be just a beginner's quick tip session for podcasting. So pay very close attention to those of you who are thinking about starting a podcast, or maybe you just recently started a podcast and you want sound quality that's not going to run off a potential listener. Because here's the thing, while most podcast listeners do not care about this kind of quality, they're not super concerned about us audio folks that just are constantly striving to get better sound. They just want it to be listenable. Most of them. Now, granted, there's going to be people like me that if there's a lot of noise or a lot of echo or a lot of air or a lot of just ambience, that I turn it off. I'm sorry. I just do. I can't. If I'm going to spend my time listening to a podcast, I do want it to sound like it is professional. Doesn't have to actually be professional, but I want it to at least sound clear. I want to be able to focus on the voice, not the room noise, not the echo, not the static, not the distortion. I want to focus on the voice. So there are people out there that will turn you off in a heartbeat if you don't at least sound solid. So, do you have to have a bunch of fancy equipment to sound solid? Absolutely not. You can sound solid a lot of different ways. So let's go to a room that would embody a beginner podcaster space and see what I'm talking about as far as tips, tricks, what not to use, what to use. This video is not for a lot of my long-term watchers. It's for the beginner podcaster. It's for the guy that's got a Yeti in the middle of a table and he's talking to it from 2 to 3 feet away. It's for the guy that's doing it on his phone or her phone with Anchor. This is for you. There's a lot of cheap options to get going in podcasting that you can sound a hell of a lot better than you may currently sound right now. So let's get to it. Oh, I almost forgot. Real quick, before we go to the Untreated room, for a beginner podcaster, a couple really great programs to get started if you're using a computer of any kind is Audacity. Just look up Audacity, download it. It's as easy as setting your input as your device, whether it be a microphone or an interface, and that's about it. So that is good for any computer you're using to start out. And then if you want to plug a USB microphone into a phone somehow, which works perfectly fine, I've done this quite a bit, the Shure Motive app, M-O-T-I-V. Shure Motive, plug your USB into your phone however you need to, whether it be with an adapter or through the headphone jack, which I don't recommend. But that app, also free, also will get you up and going with a microphone. So there you go. It's not that hard to get started. You just need to know the tools of the trade. I highly suggest looking up YouTube videos on Audacity if you need some help. They're out there. And the Shure Motive app, very easy. Plug, play, record. So let's start out home office-wise. This is my office, so to speak. Ignore the boxes of crap in the corner. Is what it is. So we're using a USB microphone in an untreated room, and most people are going to use it kind of far off of their mouth, and this is the quality that you get when you do that. So USB microphones, I'm not really a fan, and there's a reason. Most USB microphones are condenser microphones. To me, condenser microphones are they can be for a lot of things, but podcasting in a regular room is not one of them. So a condenser microphone has a larger capsule. It needs power to operate, 48 volts phantom power. It is much more sensitive than a dynamic capsule, which this is an on-stage microphone. So you see singers on stage with these a lot. The reason you see that is because they're not powered. They're a lot less sensitive, and they pick up mostly what's in front of them, not what's all around them. A condenser microphone is going to pick up everything around you. So these are good, not this one in particular. But these are good for studio settings. You're in a studio, sound treated, singing. It captures every detail. That's what a condenser microphone does. You get a much larger response from the bottom of the frequency to the top of the frequency. It catches everything, every nuance in your voice. These are notorious for catching mouth clicks, breaths. I mean, you're going to hear everything with a condenser microphone. So this is not what you want in a regular room. If you've got a well-treated studio, it's a different story. But then if you're doing multiple people in the same room on a podcast, again, not what I would recommend, because it's not only going to pick you up, it's going to pick your other host up beside you, and it's just going to all get kind of muddy and messy, almost like a Chevron t-shirt. There's just too much going on for a condenser microphone to be your choice for podcasting. Now, the Blue and the Yeti marketed the hell out of that thing for podcasters, and it's a fine microphone in a well-treated room. In a room like this, a Yeti is just not that great. You're just going to pick up way too much reverb off the walls. My voice is just bouncing off these hard surfaces and just making this sound not that great. I mean, you probably would sound better with the microphone on your phone. Maybe. We'll find out. But a USB microphone, 9 times out of 10, it's a condenser microphone. Now, there is exceptions to that rule, but I do not like microphones like this and the Blue Yeti for podcasting in a regular room. It just doesn't make sense. It picks up too many noises. That being said, let's show you something else. Okay, so here is a different kind of microphone that is also USB, the Audio-Technica ATR 2100. So this is a dynamic microphone. It's got a dynamic capsule, not a big condenser capsule that takes power and amplifies every bit of nuance of every sound in the room. This is just a handheld microphone. USB. I still am not a big fan of USB microphones, but if you do want to just go with a USB microphone to just plug into your computer and go, this to me is the best option. Now, granted, you want to keep this close to your mouth. 4 to 5 inches off is about the max in my opinion, but this is going to pick up so much more of just you as opposed to all the noise in the room. Now, granted, it's not going to be perfect because this is still an untreated room and there is still noise bouncing off, and it's going to get in here, but not to the same extent as that condenser microphone that I was just using. So if you're hell-bent on a USB microphone, use one of these. You're going to get a cleaner sound. You're not going to sound as distant. It's going to pick up your voice. This is a cardioid polar pattern, which means it's got a lobe of sensitivity and kind of a heart shape in front of my face, and it's not picking up so much from the side or the rear like the condenser does. So this and the Samson Q2U are a really good choice to start out podcasting with, because it's gonna sound better in an untreated room. Again, not perfect, but better, much better. So this is a great thing to start out with, and you actually really wouldn't even need to upgrade any time down the line if all you want to do is create a podcast that sounds pretty darn good. Let's move on. So this is your logical step up from a USB microphone, and it is an audio interface. Essentially what this is consider this your USB source, where you had the Audio-Technica and the condenser microphone before it plugging in with USB. This device does the same thing. This plugs into your computer via USB, just like those microphones that we had. You can now use an XLR cable, which is really a truer form of audio than USB. This box has better converters, which takes the sound from your microphone and converts it from analog to digital. This big box is going to do that much better than the internals of this microphone. So just imagine you are converting the signal with equipment in there, which there's hardly any room for equipment in there, so it's not going to do it as well as this box. This box is going to convert that signal from your microphone into a digital signal that goes into your recording on the computer much better than this dinky thing and whatever internals are in there. So with this device, the Motu M2, or a Focusrite Scarlett, or a Behringer mixer, something that can convert your microphone into a digital signal through a USB cable into the computer, this is in my opinion, what's going to really make your podcast shine. Granted, again, that USB microphone I just talked about, the Audio-Technica ATR 2100, that's a very good microphone and it sounds really good. And if you do want to keep it simple, that is the way to go. But this device will let you grow. You can use so much more with this device. So this microphone here, I can plug directly into the other side of the XLR cable, and I can do this with microphones over and over and over. If I don't like the sound of this microphone and I find a deal on eBay or Reverb that is just hard to pass up, and maybe you stream and you care about the looks of a microphone a little bit, this device is going to give you a lot more freedom without constantly looking for what is a limited market on USB microphones. There are way more of these style of microphones and these style of microphones that you can find and really hone in on your sound than there are the USB microphones of the world. Those are limited. There's a ton out there, but most of them are cheap and aimed at people that are getting started at podcasting without really explaining whether they work for podcasting. So, in my opinion, a box like the Motu M2 is the way to go. Freedom. You get freedom in choosing what your audio sounds like. Let's go ahead and use this device and show you again a condenser and a dynamic, and then a step up from a cheap condenser and cheap dynamic, and let's show you what the sound can be like in an untreated room with one of these devices. Now again, you may not see a huge difference, but as you learn how to really fine-tune your audio, this is really going to help you out. Motu M2 is also a great device. Okay, so now we are hooked up to the Motu M2 USB interface, and here's the great thing about these devices too. USB microphones, now granted, the Audio-Technica ATR 2100 does have a headphone jack where you can monitor exactly how you sound while recording. A lot of USB microphones do not. The toner that I had, the condenser microphone I had earlier, does not. But this allows you to plug in professional headphones, and really, these aren't professional headphones, and really give you an idea of what you sound like. So I am on a condenser microphone into the Motu M2. This is the Avlex AVS77, one of my favorite mics that I currently own. And I also told everybody I wanted you to see what the Motu M2 did for this microphone in terms of warmth and just full sound. And this is what it sounds like going through the Motu M2, which I'm a really big fan of this microphone. So even though this is a condenser microphone, this is a little different because it's not wide open. It's an end address, and it's got a nice long piece of foam that kind of blocks out some of the reverb in the room, but there is still some reverb in the room. Now, that being said, this room is going to sound better than a lot of people's rooms because of the way it's shaped. It's kind of in an A-frame. There's not a lot of height in the ceiling, so there's not a lot of room for the sound to just bounce and travel. It doesn't have much echo, but I still prefer my studio, lo and behold, because as soon as I get off of this microphone a little bit, you start to hear, I mean, it's very important in an untreated room especially, that you do get really close to the microphone. That way you don't let your sound, the sound of your voice, escape and go elsewhere. It's hitting here first, and the reverb off the walls is coming in second. But if I back way off of the mic, it's kind of bouncing around and going in there first, as opposed to me making sure my voice is the primary focus of the microphone. So this is what a condenser sounds like in an untreated room, but yet again, it is a condenser that is high quality with a nice big huge chunk of foam on it like the SM7B, and it sounds okay. I can make this work in this room. But again, you get off of it and it starts to get a little noisy. I really like to be on top of it when I'm in this room. That's what she said. Let's move on to another microphone, for example. Okay, so now we've got a much cheaper condenser microphone. No foam. It's kind of wide open to just take in all the sounds of the room. And this is what it sounds like in an untreated room. And again, I'm pretty close to the capsule in this thing. And I will say, for the sake of knowing, this was a BM800. I did a simple capsule replacement from a Samsung MTR 101. I put the capsule in there, but I kept the internals just to see what would happen. And if you get really close to it, this does capture some depth and warmth that the other capsule couldn't, but it still doesn't sound that great. So a lot of people are going to use a mic like this, and they're going to use it on a stand similar to this stand. And what that's going to do is get it far away from your mouth. You're going to sound like trash. There's no good way to make a cheap condenser microphone in a room like this not sound like trash unless you get really close to the sound source to make sure it's picking you up first and foremost and not the room. But of course, you're going to have to be a little more quiet at the same time. So again, cheap condenser. I'm way off of it. There's no foam protecting or doing anything. Now we can change that. It's not going to change it much, but I will go ahead and do that. Okay, so now I've got some foam on it, and I mean, it might help the tiniest bit, but not really. Not really. So I still have to be really close to this mic for it to really not capture everything in the room. But unless you got it close to your mouth, again, this is the sound that you're going to get, and it's just not that good. Just not that good. You hear all the echo. This is the worst I've heard the echo so far, is on this microphone. And a lot of people use these. A lot of people use the newer NW700s and the BM800s, and this is what their podcast sounds like. Like, this to me is no better than just sitting in your car with your phone in front of you and talking into your phone. There's no need for this equipment if this is how you're going to use it. Now, if you do get it a little closer, I mean, it's not going to be as bad, especially if you talk quieter and closer into it. But when you're doing a podcast, you probably want to get excited and just really have fun with it. But you can't because everything's bouncing off the walls and sounding like trash. Let's see. Motu M2, I've shown you 2 condensers in an untreated room. Let's go on to a dynamic microphone. Again, condensers, I just don't love it for podcasting unless your recording space is great. Let's go to a dynamic microphone so you can see exactly how much better they are in this environment. Okay, so now I've got a dynamic microphone hooked up to the M2, and already, and let me tell you something as well, this is a cheap freaking microphone. Like, you can kind of tell because when I say cheap and the P's hit it, it sounds kind of trashy, doesn't sound very good. But as long as you know how to use a little bit of mic technique, which you don't have to talk directly into the front, you can put it at the side and avoid a lot of the P's and the breaths that go into it instead of the P's and the breasts. That's what she said. Anyway, I'm terrible. I am terrible. So anyways, we can throw a foamy on here too. So that's going to curb the P's. The plosives aren't going to be as bad there. But this, seriously, folks, is a first act microphone. This is a Walmart microphone. And yes, you're not going to get professional level sound out of this thing, but it sounds a hell of a lot better than the cheap condenser microphone did. And granted, if you get way off of it, you're not going to get a lot of sound off of it. But these are made to hold right to your mouth. I would use this first act microphone in an untreated space before I would use most low-end condenser microphones. Actually, most condenser microphones in general, unless I wanted to be right on top of it, but I really don't like to do that. I can hold this here and be happy with what I'm doing, but you can't hold a condenser microphone. You can use a boom arm, but there's just something about getting too close to a condenser that every little mouth click, I'm sorry, that's gross, it just picks up everything. So I would rather use this cheap ass mic that I got off eBay for like $6 than a cheap condenser microphone. Now let's upgrade just a little bit to a Behringer XM 1800S. Again, not expensive. A 3-pack of these are like $30, so let's call it a $10 microphone. Okay, so $10 microphone. This is, to me, it sounds better than the first act. Not by an absolute ton, but it does sound better than the first act. So for $10 with an interface, and you can get an interface under $100 for sure. The Behringer UM2 interface will work just fine for most of these mics, and it runs $50-$60, maybe $70, I don't know. But if you look around the used market, you can find good deals on an audio interface. Just make sure you get one that has been produced in the last 5 to 7 years, or else when you plug it in, your computer may not recognize the device. The drivers may be outdated, and there may be no updates. I bought a Mbox 1 and Mbox 2 from Digi, and it just nothing recognized them. So you have to do a workaround to get those to work with your computer. So here's this microphone. Again, if I get way off of it, you're not going to get a whole lot. You're going to get more room echo than anything. But listen, we're talking, if you can find an interface used, now this one runs $169, but you can find a used interface, $50. I promise you can find a used interface for $50. It might be a Behringer 502 USB. Just make sure, if you're a beginner podcaster, just to cut out all the more difficult workarounds, just grab a USB interface or a USB mixer. They both work not the same. They're different devices, but you can plug them in, plug in a mic, and be up and going relatively quickly. So, I mean, you can podcast with a much better sound than a $50 condenser or a $30 condenser. Leaps and bounds better for $60, $70, $80. Sometimes cheaper than that. The Tascam US32 on Sweetwater is $50. Then you find you a $5 or $10 mic on eBay. You're not going to be world beating as far as sound, but people aren't going to turn you off. And that's the name of the game. You just don't want to be turned off because you just don't sound right. And you got a microphone way away from you, which is doing nothing. It's a waste of equipment. So you can have a pretty decent sounding podcast for really relatively cheap. So let's go ahead and show you what a more expensive microphone sounds like. Okay, so now this is a Beyerdynamic M99. The microphones we were using, cardioid microphones, didn't pick up much from the side and the back. This is a super cardioid microphone. It doesn't pick up much anywhere unless you're talking into the front of it. So a room like this is kind of a perfect microphone for a room like this because it's not going to pick up very much at all. Now, granted, this is a $400 microphone, so not everybody's going to want to use this microphone because it's too expensive, and you don't need to. This is once you dive deep in the audio rabbit hole, you want to just get better and better and better. And in my opinion, this is one of the best mics out there for podcasting. I love this microphone. So this is what you're going to get from high-end dynamic microphones, is a sound like this with almost no noise coming into this thing at all. So this is one of the mics I use up here in this room, along with the Avlex AVS 77. But the name of the game is getting decent audio that someone's not going to turn off. Not world-beating audio, decent audio. So the M99, this is what this sounds like. Again, tips and tricks of the trade is just to sound decent. But yeah, you just want to sound solid. Just don't sound like crap. That's the name of the game. Don't talk into your phone recording on Anchor. It's not a good idea. You just spend a little bit of money. Cattail. Just spend a little bit of money can go a long ways when you start podcasting. So stay away from condensers unless your room is foamed. There's a lot of furniture, a lot of stuff in the room that soaks up sound. Otherwise, just use a dynamic, even a cheap dynamic like that first act that I showed you a few minutes ago. That will work just fine to at least not sound awful. You're going to sound better than 98% of the podcasters that are using a Yeti that's way too far away from their mouth because it's just not picking up the sound source that matters most, your voice. Hopefully this helps some folks. Obscure Mics, peace out.